good? Yeah? You guys good? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to be here in Coquitlam in Greater Vancouver. Now, Vancouver is always ranked as one of the most livable cities, and it's easy to see why. The coastal mountains, the Pacific Ocean, and as someone who splits their time between Regina and Ottawa, the weather. Vancouver is just one of the many growing world-class cities we have in Canada. But unfortunately, far too many Canadians spend more time stuck in traffic than out enjoying their surroundings. Or more importantly, at home with their families and loved ones. Whether you drive or take public transit, the fact is, in many Canadian cities, such as here in Greater Vancouver, getting yourself from point A to point B has become a nightmare. Traffic jams, service disruptions, and delays. All this leads to less time with your family. According to Statistics Canada, in 2016, 1.5 million Canadians spent at least an hour commuting to work. And a good chunk of them live right here in Greater Vancouver. And as many commuters know, an hour is often on the low end. It can often be much, much more. Now, in 2015, Justin Trudeau made a lot of expensive promises in order to get elected. Among them was a $170 billion promise to build much needed infrastructure in cities like Vancouver. It's 4 years later, and like so many other promises, this one was not as advertised. For one thing, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has noted that for every dollar Trudeau promised to spend, he's only actually spent 60 cents. And the PBO analysis further showed that for all the money he did actually spend and for all the spending announcements he made and photo ops he staged, there were no significant results to show for it. In other words, he did spend some of your money, but got nothing done. In one of its many scathing reports into Justin Trudeau's infrastructure boondoggle, the PBO said the plan for how to spend the money, quote, does not exist. Meanwhile, commuters in Vancouver and in other major urban centers face more traffic congestion, longer drives to the office, and less time with their families. When it comes to building infrastructure that Canadians need, Justin Trudeau is not as advertised. It's about time that commuters had a government that was less concerned about front page photos and fancy spending announcements and more concerned about shovels in the ground and about getting things built so you can get to and from work faster and so your family can get ahead. First and foremost, I want to assure Canadians that, as Prime Minister, I will ensure all infrastructure projects that have already been committed to will move forward. And we will put in place simple criteria for the transportation infrastructure projects that we will fund. It will be a very simple question. Will this project reduce commute times? If the answer is yes, then that project will be put to the top of the list on the approvals process. Tout d'abord, je veux dire aux Canadiens et aux Canadiennes que, comme Premier ministre, je vais assurer que tous les projets d'infrastructure déjà approuvés et en cours soient complétés. Pour les nouveaux projets, nous allons établir des critères simples pour choisir lesquels nous allons financer. Une seule question simple. Est-ce que ce projet va réduire les temps de déplacement? Si la réponse est oui, le projet sera approuvé. And here in Greater Vancouver, that means the George Massey Tunnel Replacement, a badly needed project to address the significant congestion issues Vancouver commuters face every day, whether it's getting to and from work or to hockey practice for the kids. In Toronto, that means the Ontario line and the Yonge subway extension. Au Québec, comme je l'ai dit mercredi soir, le troisième lien entre Québec et Lévis sera ma priorité. The time for talk is over. Now is the time for action. These are the kinds of projects that make a difference in people's lives by reducing gridlock and speeding up commute times, getting them home faster after a long day at work. These projects could take many forms: road construction and upgrades, subway or rail expansion. We will put in place new standards of efficiency and transparency for infrastructure spending comparable to private sector standards, so you can see exactly how your tax dollars are being put to work. And rather than a confrontational approach like Justin Trudeau, we will work collaboratively with all provincial and territorial governments of all party affiliations to build the right projects at the right price on the right timelines. Au lieu d'avoir une relation de confrontation avec les provinces et territoires, comme Justin Trudeau, nous allons collaborer avec tous leurs gouvernements, peu importe leur allégeance, pour réaliser les bons projets au bon coût et au bon moment. Further, I will eliminate Justin Trudeau's Canada Infrastructure Bank, a $35 billion failure that has not lived up to its promise. This government knows best, boondoggle in the making, was supposed to boost investment and get more projects built. But 2 years after it started, the Infrastructure Bank has completed nothing, while costing taxpayers millions in operating expenses. I will also pull Canada's ridiculous $256 million investment in the Chinese-controlled Asian Infrastructure Bank. There is simply no way Canadian taxpayers should subsidize new roads and bridges in other countries, while important projects like the George Massey Tunnel replacement go unfunded here at home. So that's the choice this election. A re-elected Justin Trudeau-led government that will make your commute longer and more expensive, with further delays to critical infrastructure projects and a higher carbon tax that will add 31 cents a litre to the price of gas. And a new Conservative government that will prioritize projects such as the George Massey Tunnel replacement here in Greater Vancouver, the Ontario line and the Yonge subway extension in Toronto, et le troisième lien entre Québec et Lévis. Projects that will cut down your commute and put more money in your pockets so you can get ahead. It starts by eliminating Trudeau's carbon tax, which just keeps going up as this campaign goes along. For transit users, we'll bring in the Green Public Transit Tax Credit. This credit will make monthly transit passes more affordable and take cars off the road, reducing both congestion and emissions. Le 21 octobre, les Canadiens et les Canadiennes vont choisir à qui ils font confiance pour mettre plus d'argent dans leur poche pour améliorer le quotidien. Et pour les dépenses en infrastructure, ce choix ne peut pas être plus clair. Un choix entre les promesses des libéraux et l'action des conservateurs. On October 21st, Canadians decide who they trust to put more money in their pockets so they can get ahead. And when it comes to infrastructure spending, that choice couldn't be more clear. A choice between liberal announcements and conservative action. A choice between liberal infrastructure banks and conservative shovels in the ground. A choice between scandal-plagued liberals trying to save their own jobs and conservatives with a plan to get you to and from yours. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Happy to take your questions.
Hi, good afternoon. Christy Kirkup with the Globe and Mail. Do you think that your absence from today's climate demonstrations is out of step with the tens of thousands of Canadians who are currently out marching in the streets?
Well, first of all, I believe it's always encouraging when you see so many people, especially young people, show their concern for this very important issue. And that is why we have many candidates and members of parliament who are there. It's also why I'm making this announcement today and why we have made announcements in the past about how we have a real plan to battle climate change by taking the climate change fight global. And I think Canadians see, those people protesting today see that Justin Trudeau's plan is failing. It is not as advertised. Oui, c'est toujours inspirant de voir un grand nombre de personnes, spécialement les jeunes, qui s'engagent dans les enjeux importants. Et je crois qu'ils réalisent aujourd'hui que le plan de Justin Trudeau ne fonctionne pas parce qu'il ne peut pas avoir un aspect global dans son plan.
But, sir, you are running to be the Prime Minister of the country. There were 3 major party leaders that participated in Pride. You decided not to. Three major party leaders are participating in climate demonstrations today. You are not. What does this say about you personally, your personal views?
Well, you mentioned the party leaders marching today, including Justin Trudeau. I find it interesting and ironic that Justin Trudeau is actually protesting his own government's record on the environment. And he'll be marching today with so many people who realize that his plan is not as advertised. It will lead to higher costs of living while not achieving our targets. And I think they see the insincerity that he has on this issue.
But on you? What does
As
it
I
say
said,
about you?
I'm here making an announcement today that will lower commute times, which means less time people will be stuck in traffic less, which means reduction of emissions, as well as funding important public transit projects. Those are real concrete actions that will help lower emissions here in Canada. Oui, comme j'ai dit, j'ai fait une annonce aujourd'hui qui va réduire le temps que les automobilistes passent dans le trafic. Ça va réduire les émissions. Aussi, l'expansion des projets pour le transport en commun. Alors, ce sont les actes concrets qui vont réduire nos émissions.
Kelly Malone, the Canadian Press. Many experts say that reducing congestion is more about design of urban areas and better public transport. So, how will creating and expanding tunnels and new road links reduce traffic congestion?
Well, I can speak to the Massey Tunnel replacement here. When you have a tunnel that does not have the capacity to handle the number of motorists who use it, that means there's huge backlogs, and that's time spent with cars idling or moving very slowly. That leads to higher emissions. So these types of upgrades to help increase the capacity not only means that people get to and from work quicker, more time at home to spend with their families, but also less time in their cars, meaning lower emissions as well.
So, how precisely do you plan to prioritize projects given the provinces make decisions about what projects get forward for federal approval or federal infrastructure spending, which is always slower? So, what specific aspects of this policy make you think that you could speed it up?
Well, I point to the fact that the Trudeau Liberals have been completely unable to get projects built. The parliamentary budget officer indicated that there is, quote, no plan, and that this money that was spent didn't lead to new projects being built or completed. So what I'm announcing here today is that we will work collaboratively with the province. We will be establishing this criteria as to whether or not transportation projects lead to reduced commute times, and that will be the federal government's position as we negotiate these agreements. We've had a great track record in the past. The previous Conservative government had a record amount of projects built, record levels of investments in infrastructure that were completed on time, on budget, and that is the type of model that we'll be pursuing with a collaborative approach with the provinces. Obviously, provinces and municipalities will have their priorities as well. Ours will be reducing commute times. Oui. Alors, c'est évident que le gouvernement fédéral doit travailler avec les autres niveaux du gouvernement. L'ancien gouvernement conservateur a eu un bilan extraordinaire sur cet enjeu. Nous avons complété plusieurs projets et ça, c'est le même esprit qu'on va adopter. C'est bien sûr que les autres niveaux du gouvernement vont avoir leurs priorités, mais pour nous, les priorités, c'est de réduire le temps en trafic comme les projets que j'ai nommés.
Good afternoon, Mr. Scheer. JB Tasker, CBC News. The candidate you're campaigning with today, Mark Dalton, a former BC Liberal MLA, has supported the carbon tax in the past. Of course, he was in a government that brought it about. He said that it's a way to to change behavior and reduce emissions. Are you comfortable with having a pro-carbon tax person in the Conservative fold, and has he renounced his position on this issue?
Conservatives know that Justin Trudeau's carbon tax is not working. Conservatives know that under Justin Trudeau, we're falling further and further behind, while the cost of literally everything is getting more expensive. And that's why our real plan for the environment includes canceling the carbon tax, bringing in things like the green home renovation tax credit, and taking the climate change fight global. And that is the piece that Justin Trudeau just does not understand on this, that Canada can do so much more to reduce global emissions by exporting the things that we can do well here at lower emissions and exporting clean technology.
On this day of National Climate Action, you're announcing more money for roads, bridges, and tunnels. Does that not strike you as a bit tone deaf? Because obviously cars are a huge source of emissions in this country.
Well, obviously, when you can shorten commute times, you reduce the amount of time that people spend in their cars with their engines running. So that will lead to lower emissions. As well, as I mentioned today, we will be supporting public transit projects, specifically the Ontario and Yonge lines. So we have a balanced approach that will speak not just to reducing traffic times, but also expanding public transit.
Mr. Scheer, John Iveson, National Post. You mentioned the parliamentary budget officer. You've mentioned the 31 cents that you think gas prices are going to go up by. You have an ad out which says that a $2 a litre gas is just around the corner, yet the parliamentary budget officer says that's going to happen sometime around 2030. Are you misleading voters?
Not at all. We point to the added combination of the carbon tax as well as the liberal fuel standard that lead us to that figure. We also highlight the fact, and I call on Justin Trudeau to come clean with Canadians. He will not tell people what his carbon tax will increase to. He is making these types of announcements today with no details and refusing to answer how much Canadians will have to pay for it. But we do know that that carbon tax will go up. After the election, when he doesn't need your vote, but he still needs your money, he's going to raise that carbon tax, and that means more money out of the pockets of Canadians, making life more expensive.
With all due respect, though, that the PBO suggests that's going to happen in 10 years' time, including the fuel standard, 31 cents, but in 10 years, not just around the corner.
Well, I don't believe anything Justin Trudeau says when it comes to costing, when it comes to tax hikes. He is not as advertised. He cannot tell the truth to Canadians. I don't believe there's a single Canadian out there that thinks that they'll be richer by paying a carbon tax. We know his carbon tax will go up. We know he's raised other taxes, and that's why it's so important this election to defeat Justin Trudeau so that we don't get hit with an even higher carbon tax after the election.
Good afternoon, Mr. Scheer. Joyce Napier. Thank you. CTV. You mentioned your children, your 5 children, in your speeches around the country. I'm wondering if you think that global warming is a threat to your children's future.
I believe it's very important not to leave children an economic deficit, a fiscal deficit, nor an environmental deficit. And that was one of the inspirations behind our real plan for the environment. So I absolutely do believe in order to leave our children a better environment than we inherited, we have to have real action on the environment, including climate change.
So there are about eight climate events here in and around Vancouver. Will you be at any of them?
I'll be showing how we're taking this the climate change issue seriously with announcements like this, investing in expansion of public transit, and reducing commute times, and highlighting other aspects of our environmental plan like the Green Public Transit Tax Credit and our plans to take the climate change fight global, recognizing that we can do more to lower global emissions with an environment plan that speaks to what Canada can do well here, exporting clean technology around the world. That is actually going to be better off for the planet than a carbon tax that chases away jobs and investment to other countries with lower environmental standards, with a worse track record on making these types of improvements, and raising the cost of living.
Monsieur Scheer, Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada, il y a des dizaines de milliers d'élèves, d'étudiants, d'étudiantes qui marchent dans les rues aujourd'hui. Vous ne serez dans aucun de ces événements-là. Est-ce que ça ne montre pas que vous êtes complètement déconnecté avec une partie de l'électorat canadien et de la génération future qui s'en vient?
Pas du tout. Premièrement, nous avons beaucoup de candidats et des députés qui ont participé aujourd'hui et qui vont participer pendant la journée.
Mais vous?
Et aussi, je suis ici pour proposer des actions concrètes. C'est facile pour Justin Trudeau de faire un geste, de marcher dans une manifestation. Son bilan était horrible. Avec le plan de Justin Trudeau, on tombe plus en plus en arrière de nos cibles. Alors, je suis ici avec une annonce, avec des actions concrètes. Et ça, tous les élèves veulent avoir l'action, pas seulement les mots. Beaucoup des placards disent l'action par mot. Alors, aujourd'hui, j'annonce les actions que notre gouvernement va prendre.
Il y a des mesures que vous annoncez aujourd'hui qui vont encourager l'utilisation de la voiture. Il y a plusieurs experts notamment qui ont dit que le troisième lien, ça allait favoriser l'augmentation des gaz à effet de serre parce que ça encourage l'utilisation de la voiture. Vous ne trouvez pas que c'est contradictoire?
Pas du tout, parce que quand on réduit le temps que les gens doivent être dans les autos pendant leur commute, ça va réduire les émissions aussi. Et aussi, nous avons annoncé une expansion pour le transport en commun. Alors, on va avoir un plan équilibré et ça va améliorer l'environnement et la qualité de vie pour tous les Canadiens.
Mr. Scheer, I'm Daphne Bramham from the Vancouver Sun. Welcome to Vancouver, sort of. Your candidates in these 2 Coquitlam ridings, as well as your candidate in Burnaby North, Seymour, they're all committed they are committed anti-abortionists. Your candidate in Burnaby North, Seymour, believes that even in conversion therapy. Can you explain how having candidates like this, I understand that your position is you would not reopen the abortion debate, but you say that your MPs will be able to bring in private members' bills. What can you say to Canadians about who don't believe in things like conversion therapy and so on, that this will not be reopened under if you're elected?
Well, first of all, I can assure you that our government will always stand up for LGBTQ Canadians and their fundamental human rights. I will also point out that I made it very clear in the past that I will not support any effort to reopen these types of debates on these types of social issues. And Canadians can have confidence in that. Nothing has changed for our party on this issue, and it will not change under my leadership.
But
Oui, rien n'a changé pour notre parti sur cet enjeu. J'ai été très clair avec les Canadiens que, comme Premier ministre, je vais voter contre telle mesure de réouvrir ce débat.
But by choosing candidates such as this, one of the candidates in this in the neighboring riding was actually brought in by the party. The other candidate who wanted to run was pushed aside. Does that not say that what your party is trying to do is to use the abortion debate to in fact get people elected?
Not at all.
Mr. Scheer, you frequently cite the Parliamentary Budget Officer. In fact, you began your remarks today by citing him. And the Parliamentary Budget Officer has written that the carbon tax and rebate will leave 80% of Canadian families with more money at the end of the day, and that net benefit will increase over time. Now, if I go to the supermarket and I say, well, the supermarket took $100 of my money, but I failed to mention that I got $100 of groceries, that would be misleading. So I want to ask you, why do you not talk about the rebates?
So first of all, I don't believe there's a single Canadian that believes that they're richer for paying a new tax or a higher tax. Secondly, I will point out that the Parliamentary Budget Officer had to take the figures that the Liberal government provided him. I don't have any confidence in the figures that Justin Trudeau is giving. We know that Justin Trudeau gave a massive exemption to large industrial emitters. Big industrial emitters have negotiated themselves up to a 90% exemption from the carbon tax. Hardworking moms and dads and commuters, they have to pay the full brunt of it. And we know that when you add in the higher fuel costs, the higher home heating, increased expense with goods and services, where small businesses have to pass on their costs, that Canadians will be worse off under the carbon tax.
And you also cite British Columbia as an example of why carbon taxes don't work and haven't worked in the past. And I just want to read to you some comments from the legislature by your own candidate, Mark Dalton. Our carbon tax appears to be working. Independent studies have found that between 2008 and 2012, fuel use in BC dropped by 16% per capita. In 2015, a review of 7 independent studies suggested that BC's carbon tax has reduced emissions in the province by 15%. The World Bank has called it a model program. Fuel use has declined here since 2008, increased in the rest of Canada, and BC now has the lowest income taxes in Canada. So where do you get your information that the carbon tax has failed in BC?
In the last year that figures are available, CO2 emissions went up in British Columbia. So it went higher. What we do know is that Justin Trudeau's carbon tax is making Canada fall further and further behind our targets while adding to the cost of everyday essentials. So that's what we're basing our figures on.
Afternoon, Mr. Scheer. David
Welcome,
Aiken
David.
from Global News. Thanks very much. Thanks for bringing me out to BC. So in 2012, you may recall, Joe Oliver was the Natural Resource Minister, and he put a letter out in which he described the kinds of groups that organize today's climate action things, that they had a radical ideological agenda. He referred to environmental and other radical groups and was quite clear that environmental groups were just bad for Canada. You were Speaker at the time. I don't recall if you weighed in on that. So I'd ask you to weigh in now. Did you agree then with Joe Oliver's assessment? Do you agree now that environmental groups are a bunch of radical ideologues, the ones that are organizing the things today?
I believe that Canadians who want government to take the environment seriously are justified in expressing their concern. And that's why we have a real plan to tackle CO2 emissions, to reduce CO2 emissions, not just in Canada, but around the world. And that's the piece that the Trudeau Liberals are missing on here. We could shut everything down tomorrow, shut it all down, power everything down. And in a matter of days, emissions from China, India, Indonesia would replace everything we did here. So if the goal is to lower the amount of CO2 that's in the atmosphere, any plan that does not have a global context is doomed to fail. Our plan has that global context. We're going to export clean Canadian technology. We're going to do more of the things here in Canada that we can do at a lower emissions rate. That is actually going to be better for the planet than a carbon tax that makes everything more expensive and just drives jobs and investment out of our country.
So, given that, today's climate action strikes are a global event, and I'm certain hundreds of thousands of Canadians are demanding global action from the likes of China and India. They may agree with your plan, and you've missed what seems to be such an easy opportunity to show your solidarity with Canadians who want that kind of global action. I'm kind of thinking you're getting to the point you're so ordering on these things that if the Rough Riders won the Grey Cup, you'd skip the parade in Regina. Why wouldn't you just take an easy option to go and say,
it's a Rider
hold
fan.
on, it's a Rider fan.
You said Riders,
it's a
Grey
BC
Cup,
Lions fan.
And
probably,
someone.
Yeah. We'll pause.
Sorry, we have to call the press conference.
People are happy to see me, I guess, in this big thing. Thank you again, Mr. Scheer. So,
see, the traffic's so bad
the
here.
traffic is so bad. So, yeah, so just again, it just seems like such an easy thing to show up and be with other Canadians who think this is important. What on earth was the downside for you not to take a few minutes out of your campaign and say, I'm with you guys, I'm with all of you?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, parade, marches and events that Justin Trudeau is participating in. And again, I'll say, it's extremely ironic that Justin Trudeau is protesting his own government's record of failure. What I'm doing here is showing my support for those who want real action on the environment by making announcements that will lower commute times and thereby lowering emissions, and as well as expanding important public transit projects. Those are concrete steps. I've seen so many of the signs in these marches saying action, not words, and I agree. That's why we're committing to concrete actions.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Scheer. I'm from NTD Vancouver. My name is Vivian. I just want to ask one more question. That Chinese community really care about the current Hong Kong issue. What's your comments on that? Thank you.
Well, we of course support the peaceful displays and protests in Hong Kong. Canada and the Conservative Party will always be a strong voice for democracy, for freedom, for human rights, and we do support the rights of the people of Hong Kong to make their views known. In addition, we've called on this Liberal government to increase consular services for Canadian citizens who are in Hong Kong. I note that they have not done that. Other countries have, they have not. So we will continue to support the one nation, two systems policy, but absolutely stand up for the rights of the people in Hong Kong to protect their rights and their ability to make their voice heard. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone.